This is the beginning of our money series. So today in this session, we're going to ask the fundamental question: what is money really? So we need to begin at the beginning, not of economic textbooks, but of human exchange. Before money as we know it existed, people used barter. Imagine if you were a farmer with eggs and I'm a carpenter. If you need a chair and I need eggs, great, we can trade. That's bartering. But it's rarely that simple. Maybe I don't want eggs right now. Maybe I want shoes. Bartering requires a double coincidence of wants. You have to have what I want and I have to have what you want, and it's inefficient. So why was bartering eventually replaced by money? Because money solves that coincidence. It became a universal medium of exchange, allowing people to store value and measure worth in a consistent form. The earliest forms of money were incredibly diverse. Cowrie shells in Africa and Asia, large limestone discs in Micronesia, salt bricks in ancient Ethiopia. Each valuable not because of its material, but because people agreed that they were. So this leads to another key point. What qualities made something become a money? Portability, being able to transport it. Durability, it lasting over time. Divisibility, dividing it. And most importantly, social agreement of its value. Inefficiency gave rise to money, but money didn't start as coins or cash. It started as objects imbued with social meaning. Shells, beads, grain, salt, feathers, large stones. These objects were inherently valuable. They were agreed upon symbols of value. And that's important. From the beginning, money was a shared fiction. It was a story, and it only worked because everyone believed it. If money is just an agreement, what else in your life functions purely because of a collective belief? In order to understand money, you have to build up from the ground basis a fundamental understanding of nothingness, from the first principles, what is a money? And you have to break down what you've learned. You have to relearn and rethink your preconceived ideas around money, or it becomes so abstract that you will become confused, disorientated, and unfortunately, that's the way the system has been designed to create those feelings within you, so you go around continuing on the same route that has led you to a point where you need to understand money more to find ultimately freedom. So later, governments minted coins from precious metals like gold and silver. This added uniformity and legitimacy. It was legitimate because the government said so. How did coins and paper money revolutionize economies? Well, coins allowed faster trade over longer distances. And when paper money emerged, particularly in China during the Tang and Song dynasties, economies could scale without relying on heavy metals. Governments played a huge role because they guaranteed the value of money. They regulated its use and they controlled its supply. They anchored trust. Without that trust, even the most beautiful coin is just a shiny piece of metal. So what does that say about human nature? That we invent symbols to replace trust in people and trust in systems. We gradually transitioned from trading real things to trading tokens that represent value. And eventually we trusted not the thing, but the promise behind the thing. So do you trust money today because it's valuable? Or do you trust it because everybody else trusts it? So what does money really do? Well, it's said to serve three functions: a medium of exchange, which facilitates trade; a unit of account, it standardizes the value of goods and services, like a uniform measure of train tracks so the train can travel around the whole country. And it's a store of value. It allows wealth to be saved and retrieved later. But it's more than that. Money shapes behavior. It influences how we perceive success, time, and relationships. It's deeply tied to identity. And because of this, money is a moral force. It reflects what society values, what we pay people for, what we tax, what we subsidize. If a society pays entertainers more than teachers, what does that say about its values? What does society value? Money also distorts time. It allows you to exchange present energy for future scarcity, or vice versa. You can work now and retire later, or you can borrow from your future and consume it now. That's powerful and also risky. So how has money shaped your experience of time? Do you spend time to get money, or do you spend money to free time? We often confuse money with wealth, but wealth is broad. Health, relationships, education, freedom. You can have money and be poor in every other way. And you can have little money and live a life of incredible riches. So how do you define wealth? Is it what's in your bank account or your ability to live as you choose? Money is 50% of living, in my mind. Without the ability to have money, then you cannot buy your freedom. You cannot have choice ultimately, because it costs money to live, whether that's shelter, whether that's food, entertainment. You have to spend that sacrificed time and energy that you've stored into money to be able to buy back your time to do the things that you want. Without money, without sacrifice, you cannot have those things. In the modern world, you can be a nomad and you can live off the land. You can choose to operate outside of society's expectations, and that's an honest choice. Nothing wrong with that choice. Inflation, which will be dived deeper into later, that's the silent theft of value, and it shows us that money's value isn't fixed. It's a moving target affected by trust, supply, and belief. If the value of money can change, but we build our entire lives around money, what kind of foundations are we standing on? There's something deeper here. Why is trust so important to money's value? Because money only works if people believe it does. A $100 bill isn't valuable because of paper. It's valuable because we agree it's worth something. It carries no intrinsic value. The cost to print it is $1, for example, but the bill says it's worth $100. So in that sense, money is a social construct. It's a collective belief system, one of the most powerful ever created. Wealth is broader than money. It includes money, but property, skills, time, health, relationships. Money is a representation of value, not the total sum of it. Inflation erodes purchasing power. If inflation is 5%, your $100 buys $95 worth of goods next year. That's why a store of value must be stable. Otherwise, people lose trust in it and they look to store money elsewhere. That's why you're here. You're looking to store your money that's going to grow in purchasing power over time, not deplete in purchasing power, not inflate away. Fast forwarding to the 21st century, with the digital transformation of money, cash is fading and we're entering the era of digital money. So how's it different from physical cash? Well, digital money is any form of money that exists purely in electronic form. It can be as simple as numbers in your bank account or as complex as cryptocurrency algorithms. It's instant, scalable, and doesn't wear out like physical coins. So how have credit cards and online banking changed the way we use money? Well, they've done it dramatically. Transactions are faster, bookkeeping is automated, and we're rarely limited by physical borders. But this convenience also means we're less connected to our spending. Tapping a card doesn't feel like handing over cash. There's no tangible transaction there. So cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum are decentralized, supposedly, and digital assets backed on blockchain technology, they challenge traditional banking systems by offering privacy, security, and global accessibility. They can be volatile and they're not yet widely trusted as a medium of exchange, but they are the future of what people will view as money, including stable coins. Each of these topics I'm going to dive into deeper on in the course, but for now, bringing them up as commentary is important to get the fundamentals down. So the pros and cons of a cashless society: on one hand, efficiency, traceability, and lower costs. On the other hand, surveillance, privacy concerns, and the exclusion of people without access to technology. Digital convenience can also increase impulsive spending and widen inequality. Places like Europe and China have and are implementing CBDC, which is central bank digital currency. That will make more sense. Mobile money like Apple Pay, PayPal, how does that impact global financial access? Well, in places without strong banking infrastructure like Africa, mobile platforms have allowed millions to send, receive, and save money securely by bypassing traditional banks entirely. Our relationship with money is changing. Money used to be something we held. Now it's something we swipe, tap, or transfer. We're moving from a tangible to an abstract, from savings jars to apps, and from local economies to global networks. Let's talk about gold. Not as a shiny metal, but something that for centuries was synonymous with money itself. So it was the original hard money. It served as a money for 5,000 years. But why gold? Well, it didn't rot like grain. It didn't rust like iron, and it couldn't be counterfeited easily. It was scarce, divisible, portable, and universally desired. At the time it was used as money. Technology has improved, has increased. It struggles to be that same thing now, just like other technologies that it was 5,000 years ago. These characteristics made gold the ultimate hard money, money that couldn't be inflated or manipulated easily. Now, gold does inflate. The entire supply of gold inflates at about 2 to 3% per year. Empires, from Egypt to Rome to the British Empire, anchored their currencies to gold or silver. They minted coins with real metal content, and that gave people confidence in the currency. You could feel your weight of your wealth. But here's the thing, gold limited the powers of the rulers. So you couldn't just create more money to fund wars or pet projects. You had to tax people, you had to borrow, or you had to dig and excavate more gold, because gold-based money imposed discipline. If money today were backed by gold, how would government spending and debt look different? For one, they couldn't participate in perpetual, infinite, endless wars. 1914, when England was going to enter World War I, they had to put out a war bond, and the public generally paid for wars. The problem that they came to was the public didn't want to subscribe to the war. They didn't want to invest in the war, and they were nervous. So the government was a bit dodgy. They said that the war bills and bonds were oversubscribed, meaning everyone had wanted to participate. People volunteered their money to do so, but that wasn't the case. When the World War ended, they then had printed money that didn't have a backing to a gold, so they had to inflate away the currency, and people lost purchasing power. This is where fiat money comes into play. Fiat money comes from the Latin meaning, let it be done. Fiat currency has no intrinsic value. It's money because the government says it's money. They print it on the notes and they implement into law. And because the public has confidence in that promise, sometimes they do, not in all countries around the world, do they have confidence in the money. And that's why stable coins, particularly in Latin America and Africa, grew in dominance, because people they didn't trust the fiat dollar. They didn't trust the Argentinian peso. They would rather store their money in a US stable coin that is backed by dollars. Well, they would rather take the risk and hope that it was backed by real dollars rather than store their money in the Argentinian peso that was inflating away. Problem is, control invites manipulation. When there is one point of control, a government, they can manipulate it. Once they realized they could print money without limit, without needing to mine gold or justify taxation, they did. And they have always abused that power. Why would a government risk taxing people more money and being prudent with their deficit spending when they can just print it for nothing, give people an incentive, give people things for nothing, and then be benefited by gaining the trust of the person who's going to vote them in next time? Because if I tax someone, they won't like it. Their incentive is to save as much dollars as they can. And the fundamental premise means I got taxed, I didn't like it, I'm going to vote for someone else because the system is way too complex for me to understand. Therefore, I am running off my basic incentives. So we're going to now look at history. Every major fiat currency has either collapsed or been reset, or it's suffered hyperinflation because of overissuance, manipulation, and a loss of trust. The Roman denarius was once a silver coin with real purchasing power, but as Rome expanded and military costs soared, emperors began to debase the coin, reducing its silver content while keeping its face value. By the 3rd century AD, it was nearly worthless. The debasement contributed to inflation and economic instability, the loss of faith in the empire. When rulers detach money from real value, decline follows. In the 1790s, revolutionary France issued paper money. It was backed by confiscated church land, but they printed far too many. Inflation exploded, trust collapsed, and people returned to bartering and in gold. The experiment ended in chaos. In Weimar Republic, Germany in the 1920s, after World War I, which they lost, Germany printed massive amounts of money to pay for the reparations and support the economy. There's far more nuance to each one of these subjects, but the result was hyperinflation so severe that people used wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread. Life savings were obliterated. If you had to store value for the next 50 years, would you choose government paper or something else? That's the essence of the problem. Zimbabwe in the 2000s, their government printed to cover deficits and war costs. The result? Hyperinflation exceeding 89.7 sextillion%. At one point, a loaf of bread cost 35 million Zimbabwean dollars. The US dollar was once redeemable in gold. But in 1971, President Nixon ended the Bretton Woods system, and that closed the gold window, severing the dollar from gold completely. Since then, the US has operated purely on a fiat system. The dollar has lost 90% of its purchasing power since 1971. Debt has soared, inflation has become structural and a feature of the economy. When money is unlimited, discipline disappears. When discipline disappears, instability begins. In Tunisia, a lesser known but telling crisis has been unfolding, not with fire or collapse, but with stillness. Across the country, especially in rural and peri-rural areas, you will see something strange. Half-built houses frozen in time. Why? Because the currency devaluation and inflation pushed the price of cement, bricks, and labor so high that families can no longer afford to finish construction. These homes were often being built slowly, brick by brick, from money sent from relatives abroad. But now, what was once possible on a modest salary is unreachable. Tunisia's dinar has steadily lost value, and construction materials are often imported and priced in foreign currencies. The result is a cruel paradox. People have homes they can't live in, investments they can't complete, and money that's not worth enough to solve the problem. Money hasn't vanished. It's just stopped working. So what happens to your dreams when the currency can't keep up with the cost of building it? Let's look at Venezuela. Once one of the wealthiest nations in South America, now it's a cautionary tale of fiat collapse. As inflation reached hyper levels, the Venezuelan bolivar became nearly worthless. Prices changed by the hour. Store owners couldn't restock fast enough to cover costs, so many shut their doors. And in response, the government did something extraordinary. They didn't fix the currency or ease inflation. They forced stores to remain open by law. Authorities sent inspectors and soldiers to retail outlets and small shops, demanding they continue to sell goods, often at fixed prices below replacement costs. Business owners who closed out of fear or losses, or just to survive, risked fine, seizure, and jail. The reason they did this is they accused the person shutting the business as someone who was against the government. You are doing this in spite of the government. This is the illusion of control in a fiat collapse. When money breaks, government try to legislate trust, value, and reality. But reality doesn't comply. So can you force an economy to function when the money no longer does? Or are you simply pretending? This type of economic enforcement, like freezing prices, mandating shop openings, or outlawing inflation talk, signals a final stage of desperation. When a government can no longer earn trust, it turns to coercion. Both Tunisia and Venezuela offer modern parables. In Tunisia, inflation stops progress, not by destroying buildings, but by quietly preventing dreams. In Venezuela, inflation forces the state to command commerce, trying to keep shops open with laws instead of money. In both cases, fiat failure doesn't just distort prices, it distorts behavior, incentives, and human dignity. Quick question. What's worse, a hyperinflation where your money inflates away overnight, or a slow, pernicious degradation of your purchasing power, 3% per year, 3% per year, 3% per year, until your savings erodes to nothing over time, with you not even being aware of the problem? That's Australia. That's America. That's modern Western democracies around the world. What happens to their dollars? Every fiat currency in history has either collapsed, Weimar Republic, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, been restructured or reset, France, China, Argentina, or slowly devalued into near worthlessness, Roman denarius, modern US dollar, and Australian dollar purchasing power. The pattern's always the same. A currency is trusted, the state takes control over the issuance of the dollars. The temptation to overspend leads to printing. Inflation erodes value, confidence is lost, then we get a collapse, a reset, or a revolution. If you control the money supply, if you control everything, prices, debt, wages, even morality, should that power exist without constraint? So gold hasn't gone away. It's still held by central banks. It's still mined. It's still viewed as a hedge against monetary abuse. When trust in fiat falters, people run back to gold. And now digital hard money like Bitcoin is entering the conversation, designed with limited supply, decentralized control, echoing gold's properties, but with more utility. So what is harder to trust, math and scarcity, or politics and promises? Gold reminds us that true money cannot be created at will. It must be earned, it must be mined, and it must be trusted across time. It has earned that trust. Fiat reminds us that trust can be manipulated, but only for so long. Eventually the reckoning comes, always. So the real question is not whether fiat will fail, as it always does. The question is what comes next. Some bigger questions to end this first part of the course. Is money a tool for freedom or control? Well, the answer is both. It can empower people to live freely, but it ties us to a system of debt, labor, and surveillance. It all depends on how it's used and by whom. Would society collapse without money, and what might replace it? Well, it might not collapse, but it would transform. Alternatives like barter, local time banks, and community credits might emerge, or maybe we'd invent a new form of value exchange entirely. Do you think money will still be available and exist in 100 years. I don't think it exists in the form that we know it today. It may be programmable, biometric, or even reputation based. But what matters isn't what money looks like, but that it can continue to solve our human need to exchange value. How does the way we think about money influence our behavior? If we see money as a tool, we use it intentionally. We see it as a goal, we chase it endlessly. Our mindset defines our financial habits, choices, and our well-being. And finally, what does it mean to be rich in a world where money is constantly evolving? Maybe it's not about having the most money, but having the most freedom, time, and peace of mind. True wealth might just be the ability to choose how you live, but money is infinitely important in how you attain it, how you grow it, how you use it, and where you store it.